Alright, hi everyone, my name is Paulos. Today I have a very special guest. He's a friend of mine, Sander Neeft, and also fellow testing partner. And the special thing about Sander is he has won both a calling and a battle hardened recently. And I just want to interview him and see what knowledge he can bring us. So let's get right into it. Sander, do you want to introduce yourself or?
Well, I just want to say thanks for having me. Uh, Always like talking to you about the game, but now doing it more publicly, that's also kind of cool, right? So,
Mm-hmm.
thanks.
Yeah. So my first question, it's very straightforward. How do you win a calling and a battle hardened?
Yeah, oh, if only it was that easy, I guess. Uh, but if I have to answer, uh, especially on both, which is quite hard, I guess, I think the biggest thing might be luck.
Okay.
So winning a big event comes down to three big factors. I think everyone has talked about those. You need skill, you need luck, and you need a good deck.
Mm-hmm.
And I think if you want to win more than one, it's even more luck. And I'm not sure how much the others influence it then.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, you need a certain level to win a high event. But even when you're just a good player, I think there is always a chance of winning the event.
Yeah.
And then luck becomes more important, of course. And the better you get, the less luck you need.
So what kind of luck are you talking about? Of course you can draw well, but yeah, someone like Michael Hamilton, he also wins a lot of events, but I wouldn't say he's lucky per se.
I think so. What I said, right? If you have more skill, you need a bit less luck, and he has a lot of
Right.
skill, so he needs a bit
Yeah.
less luck. But even then, I can imagine Michael Hamilton still having games that he's like, "Oh wait, I couldn't do much." Especially if you're playing against great players, right?
Mm-hmm.
If you play, if Michael Hamilton plays into Brody Spurlock, for example,
Yeah.
yeah, it's unlucky on one of those sides, right? So
Yeah.
one of the two is unlucky if they lose because they're like, yeah, well, I played Michael Hamilton. I could have also played someone else.
Yeah. I get
And
that. Yeah.
and it's not just players. It's also a bit matchups, I think. But it also comes down to the third thing, which is your deck. I
Mm-hmm.
really like decks that normally make sure that there are no matchups that are terrible, terrible. I
Yeah.
really like there always to be a shot. Especially if you see a skill difference, then you want to be able to convert that into a win, even though it's a bad matchup. And I think people like Michael Hamilton and no, I just called Brody Spurlock, but we can call out a lot of names
Mm-hmm.
in this section. They all have decks that can win against every matchup, I guess, or at least they have a plan into every matchup.
Yeah. So you've touched on it a little bit already, but what kind of decks do you like to bring at callings and battle hardens and those kind of tournaments?
So funny enough, I've played a lot of Fi at those tournaments, which is
You've won
funny
both with
not
Fi.
just because I won both with Fi.
Yeah.
I think it's mostly funny because I don't play that much Fi anymore. It's just going up to a big tournament. I'm really hyped for another deck, and
Mm-hmm.
after a little while in testing, I just decide, yeah, but Fi is just better, and I keep coming back to it.
Yeah.
What I really like in the decks that I play is consistency mostly.
Yeah.
So not just the hero choice, but also during the deck building, I really put an emphasis on making it as consistent as possible. Of course, I like there to be a high roll potential, especially in the matchups that are a bit worse. You need to have like an out somewhere, and there you give up a bit on the consistency. But most of the time, I just want it to be same hands every turn. Make sure I do the thing I always do, or doesn't have to be consistency in hands. Can also be consistency in games. You'll see certain cards during a game because the game is long enough. Then it's consistent as well.
Yeah.
It gets to the amount of 3 blocks that you run, the amount of blues that you run. I like consistency. And if I look at the decks that I play, it's been a lot of Fi. I
Yeah.
think Fi has consistent damage, consistent cost curve with his blues. Um, so I think there he adds to the consistency. But also Dash and Bravo have been two heroes I really enjoy playing. and both of them a lot of 3 blocks. A lot more than Fi, obviously, but I built my Fi a bit more with 3 blocks. And then also every hand does something. If it's blocking or attacking with dash or with Bravo, it always does something. With Fi, it's more. It always does damage, but yeah.
Yeah. Okay, that's very cool. And yeah, that's true. You're always advocating for consistency. Like when we're testing, and I want to add a 2 block or like a random good card that's good in a matchup, you will be the one that says, yeah, just add that generic 3 block, and you'll be fine most of the time.
Yeah,
So
I've had weird picks with my Fi decks. So one of them that was just before Worlds was Bittering Thorns. I
yeah,
really like Bittering Thorns, but every time I looked into the deck, I was just it takes away from the consistency.
yeah,
It's not a Draconic, it's a 1 cost, it's a red, it's a 2 block. I couldn't play it, and eventually I cut it out. And um, I'm lucky. I'm happy I did,
mm-hmm.
even though I still think that card's one of the best ninja cards out there, and I'm not playing it, which is a bit weird.
Yeah. And you play Mask of the Bouncing Links, right? In your Fi deck.
And that's mostly consistency as well,
Yeah.
because my reasoning behind this, and I've reasoned with a lot of people about this, I've debated about it a lot.
Mm-hmm.
Mask of Momentum can be great. If you play Mask of Momentum and you hit with your last attack and you draw Snatch, oh,
Mm-hmm.
that's damage. Oh, you draw Lava Burst or Salt Wound, that's insane. But what if you draw that blue Soaring Strike or a Soulbeat Strike, or you draw a Warmongers? Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
then your Mask of Momentum did nothing.
Yeah.
And what I like with Bouncing Links, it's so consistent. It just makes sure that you always get the card that you want. It even adds consistency in the turns that you don't want to pop it. But if you are lacking a card to start the chain, or start your Draconic chain specifically,
Yeah.
you do Ravenous Rebel, you hit, and your hand just bricks, and you look at it and you're like, Yellow Brand. That's pretty good here. And you get the Yellow Brand instead of a Lava Burst, so you can play a Lava Burst from hand. That adds to the consistency as well. And I think
Yeah.
Mask of Momentum lacks that capability.
So that's interesting. So that's not only consistency, but also like adaptability, which adds to the consistency. So
Yeah.
yeah, that actually makes a lot of sense.
But that's not the only thing I look into when I look into decks. I like decks to be quick enough that I finish my games within 50 minutes.
Okay.
It doesn't have to be like Fi. It doesn't have to be 20-minute, 25-minute games or even shorter. But it has. I just want to make sure that I'm not going to draw at a big tournament. I've always I've always hated it to play Oldhim a bit because I was scared not of myself but mostly of the opponents you face. Which
Yeah.
I'm not blaming them because I'm the one bringing Oldhim, but it would be scary to lose a round because your opponent is still figuring stuff out and it ends up being a draw. I rather lose, to be honest. So I really don't like playing decks that might get me to that point or have matchups that go to that point. But again, the decks that I play mostly go to that 30-minute range.
So that's
To
interesting.
just make sure that your rounds are not too long and you have a bit of downtime between the rounds.
Yeah. So you get the consistency in your opponents. Like you don't have the lose factor of going to a draw. That's also a factor.
It's a really small factor, but it does two things. It does that for the draw side, but it also helps that if you have a long tournament ahead and your first round's over and you have a bit of a small break, to just, I don't know, walk to the supermarket, get a drink, or just chill outside a bit because it's really hot at the venue or whatever. That's just really nice to start your tournament off that way. And if you need 7, 8, sometimes 9 rounds without breaks most of the time, that's just back breaking. And I really like decks that at least give you some rounds that you can chill out a bit.
Decks that are calm on the mind.
Yeah, and Fi is extreme, by the way. It doesn't have to be like Fi. I think you can play Fi and you could do 2 tournaments in a day and still have breaks. I think most of my games last 20 minutes or less, including setup. So yeah, especially like certain matchups, they're so quick.
Yeah.
There's so little thinking, and it's so autopiloting. It's refreshing as well.
But yeah, Fi is easy to play. So well, yeah, I don't think that's very controversial, but somehow you tend to do well with Vi, while he's still easy to play. So, what do you think is innovative about your way of playing Vi?
So I think the what's easy about Vi is playing a hand of Vi. If you look at
Yeah.
Vi's hand, you're just that's easy, right?
Mm-hmm.
What I think you can do to level up the game a bit has most of the time to do with matchups. How do you prep a matchup? What is your strategy into that matchup? For example, I've struggled with the Azalea matchup for a while.
Mm-hmm.
First, I thought I had to play a weird value game, which I did before Codex was released. And you just block out, you do E-Strike 7, or if they don't do anything, you do a big turn. But most of the time, you're just trying to block out. You play D-React and Reinforce. And at some point, we figured out that that didn't work anymore with the new Azalea.
Mm-hmm.
And we just went full combo. And we were just like, okay,
Yeah.
we put a good card in Arsenal, Art of War, Spreading Flames, whatever. And if they slack for one turn, we'll obliterate them with like 30 damage.
Yeah.
And we figured out that that was just a way more consistent game plan into Azalea, even though it was
Which feels
something
worse.
we,
It's
yeah,
it doesn't feel like that sometimes. Like, okay.
80% of the turns you're like, oh, if only I had a reinforce or a sink below or something to help me
Uh huh.
defend. But then that one turn comes around and you don't run those, so you have a consistently good hand, and
Yeah.
you'll just blow them out of the water. And I think that's just one example, right? But you need to figure out for each matchup how you're going to how your matchup is going to go, and figure out what your best win rate is and what your best game plan is into those heroes. And
Yeah.
testing that, play testing that, getting a feel for certain cards, getting a feel for certain situations in games as well. Sometimes you have to block with Vi. That's the thing, and I think most of the time you don't. But the situations you need to block in, you need to know when those are, because if you're losing value on those turns, I think that makes the difference between a good Vi player and a great Vi player.
Yeah.
When do you block? What do you do differently than just playing your hands? Playing your hands is easy. Though I need to
But
say, I
the
see
rest.
sometimes people losing damage here and there. Um,
Okay.
I like to really count it out in my head. And of course, if you do it more often, it gets easier and you do it faster. But first couple five games, I would just say, take your time and count out every hand. Because you'll see that sometimes if you order something a little bit differently, your Shuko trigger will just be on another attack to just make it so that it's harder to block out. Or
Right.
maybe with spreading flames, sometimes the order matters, that it gives an extra +1. And if you take it outside of the game, everyone will get with the highest number, and everyone will be able to play it.
Mm-hmm.
But if you play hand after hand after hand, you need to do that every single hand, and not just when you're having the time. And I think you should also always count it out and see if there's a way to get a little bit more damage in.
Yeah. So to summarize, the things you said earlier, um, what you do is you just find the strategy that wins, albeit not feeling consistent, but it's just the best way to win. So for you to get the highest win rate possible, you just pick that strategy and just kind of accept that the cards are gonna fall the way they are, and go with that flow. Because that was in a battle hardened. I remember you saying to me, after one game, you were saying, yeah, we shuffled our cards, we put our decks in our deck zone, and then the universe knows what's gonna happen. We just have to play it out. That was just very
Yeah.
interesting to me.
Yeah, I remember this game. I actually had a couple of those games during the Battle Hardened, especially aggro games. It just feels sometimes that you put your deck down and that's everything you can do. Shuffle.
Yeah.
We'll just add the numbers, and in the end, someone has won. And I think it's a bit over exaggeration. I think there's always skill involved,
Mm-hmm.
and that doesn't have to be an insane play, but not making a mistake is already skillful, I think.
Yeah.
And especially on decks like Vi, people underestimate the amount of possibilities of making a mistake. There are so many ways you can make mistakes that people don't really see. And
Sequencing.
sequencing that we hit on a little bit already, but
Mm-hmm.
also end of the game. End of the game can be so clutch. Sometimes it's nice to just block with one more card, so you have a next turn that you have your 5 card hand because you calculated. Okay, it's gonna do so much damage. I expect to be around this life total. I just need to make sure that I just have that little bit more of a buffer to make sure I can do this big turn, and that's something that you might forget if you're playing an aggro mirror, because most of the time you're just playing your hand and you think,
Yeah.
oh, well, I'll just do 4 card hands each turn and block nothing and we'll see.
Right. The
But sometimes
small
there is,
things accumulate.
yeah, I
Yeah.
think so.
So let's touch on that a little bit more. The mindset part is really interesting to me because I remember when we tested for nationals, I was very struggling with like doing well. I was thinking like I have to do well, otherwise, yeah, I just don't kind of love the game anymore. And what you said then, you said, well, this just one tournament, there will be more. It really helped me gain perspective and really helped me understand your mindset on the game and how good of a mindset you have with the game. So that's where my question, next question comes from, is like, do you have a certain mindset going into a big event? Like, what goes through your head?
So I want to hit a bit on the discussion, the talk we had about nationals last year.
Mm-hmm.
What happened for me 2 years ago at nationals was that I had the real mindset like, okay, this is nationals, this is the moment I need to perform.
Yeah.
And I think I got in like 10th or something. And I lost an aggro mirror, and I remember being really pissed about it.
Mm-hmm.
I was really frustrated with that tournament.
Yeah.
That was just it was after the calling as well, and it just was like, this is my meta. I'm playing Fi. This is nationals.
Yeah.
I should be fine, right? And I had more practice for that tournament than for the calling, so I was really bummed out. And then I realized, okay, yeah, but this nationals didn't go for me the way I wanted to go. But it was only 6 rounds because the nationals then were really short. I had, in my opinion, a little bit of unlucky situations. I wasn't as good of a player as I could have been.
Mm-hmm.
And then I thought, you know what? But there are going to be more nationals. There are going to be more battle hardens, callings, pro tours, whatever. There are so many more tournaments to come. This one tournament is not going to define if you're a good or a bad player or whatever. This
Mm-hmm.
is just one tournament. Um, so then I switched my own mindset a little bit. At that point, I was really bummed out. But over the 1.5, 2 years that followed, I want to participate. I want to test my skill level, and I really want to do well.
Mm-hmm.
But I know that you can't win every tournament, and you can't do well every single tournament, and you need to grow, and it needs to take time. And I'm not even at the point that I want to be at. I think I can do a lot better. Sometimes that is not Flesh and Blood related. Sometimes I prioritize something else than Flesh and Blood. Sometimes it's work. Sometimes it's just friendships or relationships that you really want to put more emphasis on and prioritize more. And then sometimes Flesh and Blood is just a bit backseating, you know.
Yeah.
And I think getting to that mindset took me quite a while, and I still think there's growth for me there.
Mm-hmm.
But it's just really important to see that this is just one day of a weekend, or it's a 2-day
Yeah.
weekend. Like we have so many more of those weekends to come up, and there's so much more time. Like let's just enjoy that we
Mm-hmm.
have these tournaments, even when you do poorly or it's just not your tournament. And just prep for the next one harder, or even the same. Just be there when you can, and see if you can do a bit better.
Yeah.
And if not, that's fine as well, right? Just try to have fun during the process. Then
That's
try to have fun
important
at the
too.
tournament. I think that's way more important than winning.
Yeah, sometimes you just really get tunnel visioned on like that one tournament that you really want to do well, and you just totally forget to enjoy the process. Like the testing is sometimes very
Yeah.
fun too, and it's interesting to me. Like, whenever there's a high pressure situation, I see players not doing well. And then with you, for example, this tournament, I don't think we tested at all for the Battle Hardened,
No.
and you won it. So it's so interesting how that works. Like if you have a lot of pressure, sometimes it just doesn't work, and if
Yeah.
you don't expect anything, sometimes you just win the whole thing. That's so cool.
So, So my mindset isn't always the same. If I look at my mindset for something like Worlds, I was really prepped. I was prepped for the draft portion and the CC portion really well, which I thought was funny because I heard a lot of people say that they were prepped for one or the other, and I've never felt that prepared for a tournament
Yeah.
ever. I felt like this couldn't go wrong.
This was your list for
This
Worlds too,
was
right?
Yeah, it was the same list as well.
Yeah.
And I just thought this is insane. Worlds is gonna be amazing. I have to do well, right?
Yeah.
I didn't. Like it's a nice thumbnail, by the way, the whole battle hardened and calling thing. But I also went 1-3 in CC at Worlds, so maybe
Yeah.
add it to the list. No, Worlds wasn't my thing, and that was weird because I had the real mindset of I'm gonna do well. But that was mostly because of practice. But when I realized I was not going to make day 2, and I realized that I was out, I still had the feeling of, you know what, I'm still going to make the best out of it. I had
Yeah.
an amazing time in Barcelona. I think it was one of my most fun Flesh and Blood weekends I've had ever.
Yeah.
Even other games, this was one of my most fun weekends ever. So, yeah, I think that's way more important. That weekend was more fun than my calling or battle hardened win weekend, by the way. Like, and it
Oh,
wasn't even close.
that's great to
So
hear.
it was such an amazing event, and the Barcelona was awesome. We had a nice group of people around. We had fun during the day with Flesh and Blood, and at night just having dinner and stuff was amazing. Playing some Ultimate Pit Fight was a lot of fun. So I don't know. I just that was so much more important to me than doing well. I didn't realize that when we were going, but during I just realized, yeah, this is just so much fun.
Yeah.
Why would I be down for not doing well at Worlds?
Yeah. In the end, that's all you. That's the most important thing. Winning is great, of course, but like that's why we keep playing the game.
It
So
should be at least.
yeah, it should be. Only playing for money would be really stressful, I think. If you're going into a tournament and like I'm gonna need to profit of this, and I don't think
Yeah,
that's healthy.
I think if you're struggling with if you're someone who's struggling with the mindset, I would say try to prioritize everything besides Flesh and Blood first. So I don't want to say my life is perfect or anything. It's not even close to what I want it to be. But I'm trying to put more time into myself and thinking of how I want my life to be. That can be what kind of sleep schedule you have. That can be how good you're doing at work, or the relationships I already talked about. And sometimes you just need to prioritize something else.
Yeah.
And it can be rough because we have these seasons in Flesh and Blood, and you want to participate every single season to just make sure that you have every chance you can to
Yeah.
win a tournament. But sometimes I just let some tournaments go to make sure that I can do the things I also need to do besides Flesh and Blood. So when that's fixed, I can do the stuff I really want, and that's playing
Yeah.
Flesh and Blood.
Yeah. That's the bedrock, like of your how good you're in Flesh and Blood, like how good you are doing in life, I would say. And Flesh and Blood's just something on top of that. So yeah, we touched on this a little bit, but did you learn anything from winning these big events? Like, what did you like? Not a lot of people have won these big events because there have been some, but only one can win them from like the hundreds that play them. So what lessons would you take out of winning such a big tournament?
So it's maybe a bit on the luck factor that we already talked about, but for me, I really realized you can be not the best person or the best player in the room. You can be a decent player in the room and still win a big tournament.
Yeah.
And that also works the other way around. You can be the best person in the room and still lose the tournament.
Yeah.
Michael Hamilton can go into an armory and go 0-2. You know, like he could, right? It's unlikely, but it can happen. And especially when you're talking about winning. Someone said this on a podcast somewhere. I don't remember who, but I've heard this before, and that's Flesh and Blood creates losers. That's just that's just the thing. Like there's such a small percentage that win. Like Flesh and Blood creates losers, and it has nothing to do with if you're a good player or if you had the right meta analysis or whatever. You can be just as good as you are and still not make it. And accepting that, and that's also the mindset thing we talked about earlier. Is just that would be the one thing I would have taken away from those wins, especially for my calling win. I wasn't prepared to win a calling. I didn't feel like I was the one who was the best player in the room, not even close. And it still worked out the way it did.
Yeah.
So just accepting the fact that it can go either way, no matter what, that is something I took away from that. So yeah.
Okay. Yeah, that's interesting. So just accepting losses and that the best player is not always going to win. And sometimes I also feel like people getting very frustrated by the feeling of that they're a better player than the opponent and they still lost. Also makes them play even worse. Like I sometimes think you have to be very stoic in a tournament and just not care about any of the bad luck you have, and just move on that way.
That's one thing that I realized myself. All the tournaments that I did well at let's say, I entered some sort of weird mode where I was just so
A
focused.
flow state.
It was just a flow state. It felt really weird.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if I can even start about how it feels, but it's a weird state in which you're just so focused on the game. I have no clue what's happening around me. I have no clue what the people beside me are doing.
Yeah.
I'm just focused on the game, and I'm just communicating really clearly and just making sure everything is all right. And then I don't know. I'm just it feels like I'm an out of body experience.
Oh
It's
wow.
really
Yeah.
weird, and it just feels like, you know what? I'm just gonna completely focus on this game. And sometimes it even crawls into my head that I'm saying to myself, I'm winning this game, and there's no way I'm losing it.
Yeah.
And sometimes you still lose, of course, but it's just having that feeling and that type of focus. That's like really weird, and that is something that creates it when you're how do I want to say this? There's something that happens if you're so passionate about a game, I think.
Yeah.
But it's also really hard because you have to put aside the bad luck from the last round. You have to
Yeah.
put aside a text message from someone you just got about something completely different. You have
Yeah.
you just need to drop everything else and focus on this in that particular moment.
So
And
not
then really get
caring,
out of it.
not caring about the bad luck, just focusing on the game and not anything else. Just that allows you to enter that flow state.
Yeah, and I think in that flow state you have the real you're getting to a point where you can do the best plays for that moment. And that's not
Okay.
just the best play value wise, it's also if you're really far behind, there might still be an out. That's only I don't know, 2% chance, but
Yeah.
it's your only out, right? You need to find the 2% out. I'm not saying it's going to work out because it probably won't. But if you're already giving up, if you're already dropping the ball there, then I think it's going to be hard to win these tournaments. I think you even in your bad situations, you need to look for the only way to win.
Yeah.
I had this in the calling finals. I was getting dumpstered. I think Peter Ward ran a way better deck. He was way better prepared for the matchup, and there was no way I was winning that game. But I didn't give up completely. I still had that mindset of I'm gonna do the best thing I can do here.
Playing
I
to
know
your
I'm
out.
behind. I'm gonna look for my outs, and I ended up being like really lucky because that out actually paid off.
Yeah.
But if I was frustrated and already thought it was lost,
Yeah.
maybe I would have blocked with my snatch, or I would have not snapdragoned the snatch, even though that was my only out.
Yeah.
But it was a really weird play to do. But it was my only out, so I did it.
And that's won you the calling. That's pretty crazy.
I can just imagine if you're not focused enough, that if you get into a situation where you're behind, you'll just let go or you get a little bit frustrated. And I get that. I have that sometimes as well. It's not like I'm always in this flow state, but it's so nice if you can get to that momentum.
That's awesome. So I just wanna ask you some other questions. And first of all, is we talked about this flow state, and usually for me, this happens when I'm facing a very skilled player. But I was just wondering, in those tournaments, who was the best player you've ever played against? Which gave you the most challenging game? I'm just quite curious about that.
So I think if you ask it that way, the most challenging game, I'm not even sure if I would remember who that would be. I think sometimes you just end up in really clutch games, and that can be against anyone. I don't think that has to do with player skill. Sometimes just games can go to that point where it's every small little thing can decide who wins.
Yeah.
But one thing that stick with me from the last Battle Hardened was my last Swiss round. It was a win-in against Stefano Mioni.
Okay.
He's like a really good Azalea player. I think he's top 10 elo, at least,
wow.
maybe 8th or 7th or something.
He has had a lot of top 8s with Azalea, I think.
Yeah,
In
he top 8 a lot. I think he did Birmingham, and I'm pretty sure he did a couple other tournaments.
Antwerp
but I can't
too,
remember.
I think.
Maybe he did the Pro Tour as well. I'm okay, so I'm not going into details, but I know he's a really good player.
Yeah.
I hadn't played against him before, but I know a friend of mine, Wouter, he has played against him, and he talked a bit about him as well, and he said that was a really good player. And it was a weird game because I played Fi and he plays obviously Azalea. And from the get-go, I have my feet on the gas, and it's just going great. You know, my game plan that I wanted to perform, that was working.
Yeah.
And I noticed really quickly that his cards didn't line up. He didn't got a lot of options to shoot a red in the ledger or to get a big dominated arrow that did something useful. So he started blocking out more and more. And I looked into what he was blocking with and how he was blocking. And I realized, oh, this is weird. Normally Azalea players, if they have a bad hand, I'll see them just take it because the card's value is so much higher if they attack with it. But he was blocking with 3 boost spells for 6. So it was 3 cards for 6 block. And I was like, why is he doing this? And then I realized this matchup is all about locking Fi down. And his mindset was, okay, I can't lock him down with this hand. So I'm blocking. Because if I find that hand to lock him out, it doesn't matter what my HP is. If he's like at 8 HP, but he has a way of locking me out of the game, and I be of 40, he might still win.
Yeah.
But he needs to get that hand to lock me out. And he knew that. And at some point, I realized what he was doing. And I'm like, he's looking for that one hand to lock me out. And we got in a weird situation where I had my pouncing links up, and he just was looking for that one hand, right?
Yeah.
And I attacked him with an E-Strike, and it was my last card in my hand. Or at least I bottomed the card, and then it was my last card.
Yeah.
And I had nothing else. I didn't have Snapdragons, and it was just 5 damage. He wasn't going to die from that 5 damage. But I looked at him, and I was like, okay, he hasn't blocked with his full hand, so he probably has something this time. So I went E-Strike, go again. And his face was just like, fuck.
Because you still had pouncing.
I still had pouncing. It was so weird to say E-Strike, go again with nothing to threaten, just pouncing. And he still had a lot of cards to block with as well.
Yeah.
And I was just like, you can do 2 things. You can let it hit, but I'm going to pouncing Salto him. Or you can block it out, but then your only good turn that you've waited on all game will be lost. And it was just the way he played that matchup, even though it was really lucky on my side, and he didn't get to the normal Azalea arrows I'm used to.
Yeah.
So let's throw the win at luck. But the way he played it, I was really impressed. I was like, okay, he really knows what's going on.
Yeah.
He really knows this matchup in and out. It was great to see, and it gave me a really different perspective of my matchup against Azalea. I never thought it would be going this way. I never had a game in practice that looked similar to this.
Yeah.
But I did understand why he did it, and I think it was a really great play of him. It didn't pay off, but he played to his outs, and I think he played it just insanely well. And that's just one game, but what I've heard from him, he's an incredible player. So yeah, I think that's the best player I played in a tournament, I guess.
Oh, that's cool to hear, and a cool story. It's like almost like Azalea knew that Fi was going for that one big turn, and blocking just cost her. Yeah, it's like using our own strategy against you. Okay, and just speaking about this a little bit more, what's the best play you've made in a tournament, you think? Like one specific interaction which you feel like, okay, this was... Oh, the E-Strike, of course, was really interesting. No cards and choosing go again instead of +2 or draw a card. Yeah.
I didn't think about it, but that was actually like... That's a good one.
So, one, but not that one.
Yeah. Ooh, that's rough. So it's a bit weird, but I think I remember my mistakes more than my
Okay,
plays.
that's also
I it's yeah. I think I don't really remember the highlights in the play. Well, okay, so it's the other one I already called out. That just playing for your outs in general,
yeah,
and it doesn't have to be a specific play, but sometimes just seeing, okay, there's no way I'm winning this. But if I draw this card from my snatch, I might, and
yeah,
then just snatching just because that's the only out. I
yeah,
think those plays are really clutch, and
yeah,
I think, well, I already gave some examples, and don't think of, I can't think of one at the top of my head right now, but those plays just feels
yeah.
insane. I love
Playing
those
to
plays.
your outs and you getting the out.
In
That's
the most dire
yeah,
situation, that
yeah,
feels insane. And even when you lose, you can still be proud that you did the right thing.
yeah. That's also very fair. Okay. Well, Sander, thank you so much for agreeing to do this interview with me.
Yeah.
Um, I've actually learned a lot of from what you said, and do
I
you
do
want?
want to add one thing,
Okay,
and that's a follow up at your last question.
okay.
I don't remember my highlights, but I do remember a big mistake.
Okay.
I had a semi-final in a pro quest, I guess. Yeah, I
Mhm.
think it was a pro quest, and it was against my friend Wouter, and I played Fatigue Bravo. It was before it was cool, by the way, because everyone played all the time. I played
Okay.
Fatigue Bravo. And it was AB2 with the Rampart Shield, and it was just into Briar. It was just so much fun to
Briar.
block and fatigue that out. I
Yeah.
think nowadays people would have figured out how to beat the fatigue with Briar, but then that was a bit less of a thing.
Mhm.
Uh, and what happened was I was fatiguing him, and I had done so a bazillion times in testing, and it worked nearly every time. So I was really confident, and I was fatiguing him, and there was no way he was going to win. It was just, it looked so dire for him. His deck was running out. He was getting to his last couple attacks. I think he had only like 3 or 4 attacks in deck, something like that. I was feeling really confident, and at some point he didn't threaten that much damage, and I looked into my hand, and I had a triple blue crippling crush hand. And I look at him, and I'm looking at his armor, I'm looking at his cards, and I go through his discard pile, and I think, you know what? I don't think I have to block this because I can just crippling crush him, and there's no way he can block the crippling crush.
Mhm.
So I take the damage, and he's quite surprised of me taking the damage, obviously, because I've been fatiguing him all game. And I dominate crippling crush, and I look again at his equipment, and I realize, wait, he can also block with that. And I add up
Oh
the numbers
wow.
again, and he just throws his fridge in front of it, adds one card that gets buffed by the embodiment, and he blocks enough to not get a crippling crush. And then next turn, I draw a hand that doesn't block that well. Maybe there was a rouse in it or something. I don't even remember what happened.
Mhm.
But I died. And
Wow.
I was just looking at that game state, and I thought, okay, there's no way I'm losing this. And then I found a way. So you need to play
You
again to your
found
outs, but you
a
also need to play
not
well.
those outs.
Not those outs. I was out of the game because of it. Yeah, that was
Wow.
weird. I think I didn't have to do anything. I could have just done nothing, and I would have won. But yeah. I
That's
thought
so
about this for 5 minutes, by the way, because it's untimed. The semi-final was untimed.
really.
So I really took my time, and eventually I was like, "There's no way he's blocking this. He can't block it."
Yeah.
And well, he could. And I lost the
Yeah.
game because of it.
Sometimes one of those mistakes is enough. And
Yeah,
it
I'll never
makes sense
forget.
that you like consistency.
Yeah, yeah.
All right. Well, Sander, thanks so much. Um, I've really enjoyed this, and I think it's important people get a little bit of better understanding from you because, yeah, I think you'll keep playing the game and you'll keep showing up at the tournaments like the Pro Tours and Worlds. So thank you a lot, and well,
Thank you. It was a lot of fun.
yeah, let's let's see you in another tournament.
See you there.